started. Um, this session is building better case studies. Um, and today, I actually got to turn my volume down on my monitor here. Um, Today, we're going to be really focusing in on a topic I'm super passionate about. As you'll find out here in just a moment, I am, in fact, a portfolio fanboy. It's one of my favorite things about being a designer is assembling teams and getting an opportunity to review the work of so many people that are wanting to join a design organization. Over the years, I've probably hired about 50 designers, and if you look at the ratio of portfolios to designers, that means that I've probably reviewed, I don't know, somewhere around 500, 1,000 portfolios. To get to a point where you've hired 50 designers, you have to go through a lot of portfolios that aren't quite there. And one thing that I'll note is that over the years, I've looked for in a portfolio has changed drastically. A portfolio from, I don't know, the mid 2000s, and like 2004, 2005, looks a lot different than a portfolio that you'd be looking for today. And it's because our expectations have elevated over time. So that said, I'm going to be approaching this from a perspective of what we're expecting today from you as a designer coming in trying to join a design organization. And honestly, so much of that comes back, as I said, our expectations have changed over time. What we used to do with portfolios and case studies is it used to be we would just wow you with like splashy visuals, and I just like knocked the mic. We would wow you with splashy visuals, and that was enough. You would just try to like lob people over the head with like some magical visual thing. You wouldn't explain anything about the team around it, who was involved, how much time you spent on it, how you built it. It was just show me the visual. And it was this magic trick. It was honestly a magic trick. And somewhere along the way, I think we all wised up as an industry and said, you know what, maybe we should focus more on how you do the thing rather than what you did. Because I need to know that you have the ability to do that thing over and over and over again with different sets of constraints and limitations and problems that we are trying to solve. So that's why I personally got completely over the visual design portfolio. And this really came to a head recently when I was reviewing Case Study Club. And if anybody's really wanting to elevate their game, doing case studies, I would consider signing up, and just sign up for the newsletter for Case Study Club. It's not mine, so I complete transparency there. I don't know the folks running Case Study Club, but I do know that it's like a really nice look. You can kind of keep on top of who's really trying to put quality case studies out there. And personal humble brag, got some students on that site, so totally happy that some of the students that I've been working with are actually featured on that Case Study Club site. But what bums me out is when I jump into Case Study Club and I'm looking through some of the case studies, and some of them are really exciting, and then others are just like, yeah, but I want so much more from this experience. And just a point of clarification: if you're here, I see some people over. I can see that people are here. If you want to reach out, if you have a question, feel free to use the YouTube chat, and I will be addressing those questions as they pop through. So don't wait till the end of the talk. Feel free to jump on and shoot me a message in chat if you just want to say hi. I'd love to know who is hanging out with me today. So I just want to go over to Case Study Club really fast. If I can find my browser. Yeah, here we go. So Case Study Club, it's literally casestudy.club. And there's so many projects here that you can go take a look at. And if I jump into a few of these, I just want to kind of outline what I mean by some case studies are simply better than others. So here's something from Powell Nolbert, and I'm probably butchering that, but beautiful work here, just lovely work. It's really expressive. I love the colors, but as I go through it, what I notice is that this was work that was done with Uppo Mobile, so I'm guessing that this is something that like literally is in production, so in the wild. And as I look through it, what I notice is it's just kind of a bunch of shots. There's nothing explaining the thinking behind it. There's nothing explaining the constraints or the options or the things that they didn't use. Like, where did the inspiration come from? Like, there's none of that. So for me, this is a portfolio piece that feels much like what I would have seen, like I said, back in 2005 or 1998. It's very visually driven, and it's interesting to look at, but it tells me nothing about who worked on it, how long did they have to work on it. Aside from Powell here, I don't really know much about this aside from that it's pretty, and it is pretty. All credit to that, but I'm not interested in that as a hiring manager. I would pass over this because I don't know how they got there. I don't know why it's here. So I keep moving through, and again, I'm just going through what's here in the Case Study Club. So this one right here actually is one that's listed from Evo, and if we pop into Evo's case study here, we'll see some work here, and it's lovely looking work. I'm going to go ahead and click on Evercron. And I like the little animation that's here. It takes you into the actual site. As we look through it, it talks about, hey, I joined as a lead designer, and I'm responsible for the web application design, front end, iOS, app designs, marketing efforts, all of that. So I'm getting a real sense of what they're doing there. And then it kind of immediately jumps into the visual design, and then it talks about we had to launch a corporate site, and from there, here's a quote from the founder. Here's some of the pages that they did, and it says most of the work I've done for Evercron isn't disclosed to the public yet and is only available to current customers. This includes main website application, iOS and Android apps. So while it's kind of interesting. It says the corporate sites here. It seems like this is really a lot like the last thing that we saw, except with a few more details about the relationship with the company. I don't know how these have been tested. I don't know where I don't necessarily know what the target audience or what problem that was trying to be solved here. So for me, this is not quite enough. I'm not getting enough out of what's being displayed here. However, if I go back, I know that there is this Simon Pan project here, currently shaping the future of news at Google, previously worked as a designer at Uber and Amazon Prime. And if you go into Simon's work here, it begins outlining a project for Uber, and in 2012, tapping a button to Uber across the city felt magical. By the start of 2016, the magic receded to a slew of disparate features that made the experience slow and complex to use. Immediately, Simon is frame rather than like trying to wow us with a visual. Simon is framing what the problem is, and it also says to comply with my non-disclosure agreement, I have omitted confidential information from the case study. So Simon's got an NDA, but anything confidential has been pushed away, and I imagine that Simon probably said to his employers, "Hey, do you mind if I can show X, Y, and Z?" And they probably went through and said, "Yeah, you can show this, but take these parts out." So what we're going to see here is some design work done for Uber, and it really breaks down like the evolution, like here's the progression through time, and here's the challenge, here's what he did on the app, and then here's the process. This is what I'm looking for. This is the type of thing that I could spend a day just kind of digging through. You can really grow as a designer, and even as a design manager, going through a solid case study. And this is setting like here I'm guessing this is Simon, but here they are in the field. Here's a whiteboard kind of outlining like what the what the thinking was. I see some sequential like 1 4 3 4 4 4 2 4. I'm wondering if that is, maybe that's a date, maybe that's a list of problems and ratings. Early insights from the field. This is all just fantastic stuff. So much more interesting to me as a designer than what I would typically see from like a swashy, beautiful paintbrush effect. And this is the difference in a design, a case study that's focused on like just visual appeal versus problem solving. And that's really what we're going to spend most of our time today talking about. Process is way more valuable to you than just a pretty case study. There's so many of you that will come back to this, and you have the ability to produce a beautiful visual design, but if you don't talk about the process behind it, it's not really going to land and get you the attention needed to be called in for that interview. Just want to take a second. We've got our first question. Creative Crackpot. It says, how effective or distracting are before and after screens in a case study? And I think that's a great question. I really believe that before after, you can frame this in a lot of different ways. One, the before after, like we saw with Simon, he actually had like before 2012, 2014, 2016, so it was more of a progression. But I think that shows an evolution. I always encourage that. One thing that I have pushed back on, though, to get right to your distracting part, is that if you try to put a before and after together, and then you are notating both screens, like before one, after one, before two, after two, it can be hard to follow the trail between the two. It's better to look at the details of the before after in discrete callouts below, rather than trying to annotate on a before after. I just want to see the before after together, and then I want to get into the breakdown of what changed between the two. I don't want to show the before after and try to detail all the various ways that the thing changed. So I hope that highlights some of the thinking that goes into not only when you show up before after, but how you show up before after, because I do think that there are significant ways that you can kind of frankly screw it up. If you're going to do it, show it, and then get out of the way, like get into the details of it after that. Don't like try to layer it all into the same thing. Also with the before after, keep in mind that case studies should be able to be viewed easily on a mobile device. So try not to get into a situation where you're doing like I'm going to combine this before after of two desktop images side by side, and then frankly you go down to a mobile size and they're the size of a postage stamp. They need to be able to stack at that point. So try to do your before afters like as separate images that you can put into, and we're going to talk in a minute about like formats for your case studies, but you want to make sure that those things can be responsive. And regardless of whether you're coding up your own site or you're using some generated site like a Squarespace or something, how you think about your images and how you're inputting them will matter. And most sites, like a Squarespace or whatever, should be able to handle two images versus one. That is a kind of a limitation with some of these off-the-shelf sites that you see some people using, is that you don't have the control over it. And that's where a lot of people are like, oh, well, I had to put one image together. And it's like, yeah, but you can't look at it very well on mobile. So, and we'll get into those considerations in a moment. Thanks for that, Creative Crackpot. I also like that handle. That's a lot of fun. So, process versus pretty. I think we've hammered that into the ground. The other thing I want to say is that I'm way more interested in your case study than I am a portfolio. Another thing I want to really talk about today is the fact that you don't necessarily have to have a fully baked out portfolio to have an effective case study. I have had students land jobs where they had to move cross country with only a case study in hand. I've seen it. It blew my mind when it happened, and I certainly wouldn't. Like in my heart of hearts, I'd much rather you like wait and have the fully baked out portfolio and then go looking for jobs, because I think you're leaving money on the table if you don't. But I've seen students like walk in with a case study. They had it up on a site, or they had it just as a simple HTML file. Just the one case study can generate so much attention for you if it's really good. If you've got a really good case study, there's no reason to wait to have the fully baked out portfolio. And we'll talk about a few different ways that you can go about doing that. The four big things that I want to talk about today are case study segments, and we'll talk about the segmentation of how to map to your strengths. There's math to this, okay? And sorry, I hate to bring you into case studies and start talking about math, but I do think that any good UX portfolio case study has a force multiplier to it over some of the others, and I'll go into what I mean by that. I also want to talk about the materials. This is literally the tools that you use to produce the case study. We are beyond the realm of PDFs. Okay, so I don't want you thinking about in terms of I'm going to make a PDF. That's not necessary. We're going to talk about different ways that you can get your case study out there. We're also going to talk about the work inside. The actual like determination between a school project, a work project, and just like a hobby project. There are different expectations from each, and I don't want you looking at a professional case study or a student case study and applying it one to one to what you're doing. You need to understand where that thing is, what it's addressing, and then look at what you're doing. This is no different than copying somebody's visual design or like lifting a piece of code. You can't just plug and play these things. You need to understand what they're trying to do. And then finally, we're going to look at the literal anatomy of a case study. What are the component parts to a case study? What makes an effective case study? Got another question here. This is from Karen. Oh my God, are you kidding me, Karen? That is fantastic. Okay, so a little backstory here. Karen says, got my current job doing an impromptu case study of BusyBus. I want to explain, I'll give you a little breakdown here. Karen, when I wrote that BusyBus project, I literally was on a morning run and I noticed that there were people kind of sprinting around to get to a bus, and then they didn't get on the bus, and it confused me. And what I acknowledged at that moment was that there were people that thought their bus was arriving. They ran to the bus stop, and then they got there and they realized it wasn't their bus. I don't know if you remembered the prompts from that case or that project, but that is super cool that Busy Bus played out that way for you. I really do believe that if you can do the work, if you've got one good project, it can get you through, provided that you have a good case study that explains what exactly it is that you're doing. So yeah, absolutely, I totally agree with Jessica there. Absolutely fantastic story there, Karen. So the power case studies right there. Karen is in the feed talking about her getting a job right off the top with just a case study. So let's jump right into it. I think there are really 4 segments that case studies kind of bottle themselves into with regard to design. I do think that there are case studies where you can talk about back-end architecture or any number of other things, but I'm really this morning focusing on UX design, visual design, UI, and front end. I think that each of those are really disciplines that you can find a way to bottle them together in a case study. Now, what I will say is anything that is visual, UI, or front end related, people are expecting that to just pop. It's got to have some spice to it. Only if you're doing a UX only case study, you have the opportunity to do something that's text-based. You can just show some squiggly line drawings. You can get away with it not being visually impressive. Everything else has got to have some visual pop to it. That said, the UX case study absolutely has to be process. You have to go through all the detailed steps in your design process if it's UX only. A UX designer who is not visually impressive can land jobs, but you have to be so much more on your game with regard to your findings, your testing, how you did your research, your distillation of that research. That's all got to be in there. That said, each of these segments basically adds up to a point. In my head, I do some math here. So if I have a visual design portfolio that shows UI animations and I have some front-end skills, that's like a point each. So in this case, if I have a visual portfolio that's showing my CSS grid abilities, that's like 2 points. Now, the UX portion is a multiplier. And this is where, you can basically make an equation out of this if you want to. But I really feel that any designer who puts UX at the core of what they do is a multiplier, a power of stronger than any other designer that's going to come up against them. My point is, if you take that same visual front-end approach that would have gotten you 2 points before, UX is a multiplier of 3. So that ends up that portfolio is weighted at like 6 points over the visual designer who does some front-end work. That UX component is so important because you're going to be able to sit there and see whether or not the problem should be solved at all. You're going to be able to sit there and see how to determine whether the problem should be solved and how to go perform that research. The UX piece brings so much to it. That said, while these segments add up, they can also detract, okay? If you have a portfolio and let's say you're weak on the front end side, you're really weak over there. It's the same as saying that I just have the UX portion. You would be smarter if you bottled UX and visual design together and left that other portion off. The same thing goes for if you're not a UX designer. You can't half-ass your way talking about UX process. You can't leave out user. You can't like write a user experience process portion of your case study and leave out like user testing, or leave out doing the research component altogether. You can't like just start with information architecture. If those things happen, if you leave holes in your case study, it's going to show up and it's going to detract. So I would rather you have to realize what you have and what you don't have and tailor your case studies to that strength. Okay? Don't fake UX if you don't have it. Don't fake front end if you don't have it. Focus on your strengths. And also, this is a great time when you go through a case study, when you're writing a case study and you realize you're lacking something, like, man, I really didn't do a great job here on my user testing, or I really didn't do a great job here on determining what animations would be necessary for this prototype. That should be like a flag in your head for where you want to go next with your design growth. Okay? These are not like, it's not the end of the world if you determine that a case study you put together isn't the strongest thing. It is the end of the world if you ignore the fact that you didn't get where you want it to go, but you are in control of that. Like, use these opportunities to go, hey, you know what? I really need to elevate my visual design skills because this case study, the weakest portion is the visuals, or the weakest portion is my research. Use your case study as that litmus test. Where am I strong? Where am I weak? And shore up those weak spots. You're not going to get there all in one fell swoop, okay? It took me years to develop my visual design skills. I started with visual design for me, and then I went into front end, and then I went into UX. And only because I fell flat, I was talking on Twitter earlier this week, I fell flat on my face with UX. It was like, oh, we can build it. We can build anything. Let's just go build it. And then we built it and it failed. And I was like, why did it fail? Oh, we didn't do any research. So know that I'm speaking from experience of failure. And that's what led me to put such an emphasis on the importance of UX. So another question that comes up so often with case studies is, do I need to code my portfolio and or case studies? All right, and this is a legit question, and I think that the only way to really answer it is to say, well, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to do? Because this is really a maybe or maybe not scenario. Depending on how you produce your portfolio and case study, really projects to the type of job that you want to have. So if it's a UX job, I think you can totally get away with a Behance or a Squarespace or a Wix or Webflow or whatever. But I put an asterisk here for a reason. In the past, many of you know that I've worked at boot camps. And I've said, hey, if you're going to have a job guarantee, you've got to do the UX component, you've got to learn visual design, and you've got to do front end. Okay? I still believe that. I don't believe that you have to know it all to land a job. I think you have a much better chance of landing a job if you have it all. Okay? There's the difference. Can you land a UX job without knowing front end? Sure. Will you have a better chance if you know front end? Yeah. Your chances just go up. All right? There's a possibility that you could be a visual designer. You just raise your hand and say, I want to do UX, and you land a UX job. There's a possibility. I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't say, yeah, that's going to happen. Case in point, I had no mobile experience when I got my first mobile job in 2008. I was a visual designer, and I said, I want to work on iPhone apps. and it was the area and time before there was an app store. I had an interest. People wanted to be in that space. Nobody had experience. The timing lined up. I was able to move from visual design into mobile design without any experience in that space, because it was only the crazy people that raised their hand and said, I want to make the leap. Maybe you'll get lucky in a situation like that, but most likely that's not going to happen. I would not bet on lightning striking twice. Like, say the next thing that pops up, let's pretend it's VR, and you raise your hand. There may be a lot of people out there with that experience. You're not going to just jump over. So here, UX job, you could totally roll out there with a Behance or a Squarespace. That's fine. If somebody else rolls out there with their own site, or somebody else rolls out there with a Squarespace that's really shiny because they got nice visual design shops, you're probably going to lose that head-to-head. Okay? But just know that you could roll out there with one of these. Visual design job. I really think that visual designers have to have, Dribble, WordPress presence. You need to be able to put your work where the people are looking for you. That said, I have Dribble here. I was just talking the other day with somebody who said, I've been on Dribble for 7 years. I've gotten 0 jobs out of having a portfolio on Dribble. So just know that Dribble is where designers are looking at other designers. It's kind of like a car show. No one's actually doing a lot of work out of that space. Not that I've met. Maybe you know somebody that has. I haven't personally seen that. But as a visual designer, you don't know how to code. I think that, again, this is where the Squarespace and the Wix, this is no different than, I was a print designer for a long time. I remember my first website was like, I forget what little weird Dreamweaver Apple tool I was using, but it was not HTML and CSS. I can guarantee you, because frankly, I was scared of code. That came years later that I broke through, and I think Dribble's supposed to be with 3 B's there. So I spelled it correctly only to misspell it as a brand. Now, if you're going for a UI job is you're going to do you're making prototypes and you're helping determine what that interface is going to be. Pay attention to the job posting. If that job posting says must know HTML and CSS, you don't want to have them open up the inspector on your case study and see this. This is Squarespace. I don't have the sense that you know how to do the work that I ultimately will be wanting you to do. So that's where we begin to bleed more and more into, you need to have your own site. You need to do your own work. And that clearly means the same for front end. And when you get into front end, if you're applying for a job that's definitely doing front end work, be sure to clean up your file. Like, and this is funny. This is off the Simon Pan site. Like the Simon Pan, like the guy from Uber. I went through and he's got this header that's like, it's noted out. I wouldn't leave this sort of thing in my portfolio. And to be completely honest with you, I probably have left this sort of thing in my portfolio. But when people go through and they inspect element, it feels sloppy. So clean up your code base, okay? As you're going through, if there's elements that you're removing, don't just note them out. Remember to remove them. All right? You can, if you're using version control, you can always go back and get this stuff. That's one of the great things about having GitHub, is that I can delete something, and if I want to go back and get it, it's very easy to get to. And then, there's the classic UX, UI, yeah, Creative Crack 5. Everything I'm pointing out is something I've done, okay? I like every single thing that I'm talking about. I am not sitting here going, I have never done that. No, I guarantee, if it's stupid, I guarantee I've done it, okay? If it looks dumb, sign me up. I'm right there because I've probably done it. And at the same time, I also realize I probably didn't get this job or that job because of it. And that's why I'm sharing this stuff with you. The UX UI job, these almost always are in that latter category. You're going to need to have your own port. And got to be honest with you, this combination, that's most of the job postings you're going to see. All right. When you are a UX researcher and you are really focused on UX, I think it's fine. Like, I've seen some really like beautiful UX research case studies that are just living on Behance. Okay. One of the best ones that I saw was on the Amazon Fire, like Amazon Fire TV, I think, and the designer had just broken out in great detail all the research that they had done at Amazon, and it was on a Behance page. The big takeaway that I want you to have here is that the type of job that you're applying for needs to align with how you're making these artifacts, okay? And if I don't want you to go blindly into a situation where, hey, I applied for that job, but I just kind of sent over my Squarespace and it didn't work out. And I'm like, for me, it's like, yeah, they probably did inspect Element and saw that it was a Squarespace and they bounced. It's not necessarily your work. It's that they weren't sure if you had the ability to pull that off. So again, if you're not there right now, that's okay. You can grow into that. But just know that the material that's underlying your case study does matter. And this is a portion of the talk where I want to address specifically you as the case study constructor, because you're going to see a lot of stuff online because you're smart and you do your research and you look around. But in looking around, I want you to consider where that case study is coming from, what that case study was built around, because what the case study was built for determines a lot of how it's constructed. And you can't just take the construction of a case study that was made for a different output and apply it to what you're doing. Case in point, if you have a case study that's for a work project, I need to know what the outcome was, and I need to know specifics. If you redesigned a site and the intention was to make engagement longer, or to make more people click, or to make more people come to the site and stay, whatever that was, I need to know what it was, and then what's the data on it. Did you increase engagement by 2? Did it go the wrong direction and number of people dropped? Did it load faster? Did it load slower? Like what was the thing that you were trying to do, and how'd you do? Most people are going to say, yeah, I did the thing and it worked, and that's great, but it's not like a one-to-one. It's not a straight line. You probably had some screw-ups in there. We're going to talk about screw-ups in a minute, but I need to know the journey, okay? But specifically, I need to know how it did. Now, that's a much different bar than what a school project can do, okay? A school project, I see a lot of outcomes listed in school projects, and this is not just from my students. I see a lot of outcomes immediately in there from like every design school that you could possibly go to. There's students writing outcomes for school projects, and that's not how a school project works, everybody. A school project is in a box, and you're doing it, and you may go do some research, and you may you're working with real people and you're getting real feedback, but it didn't launch, so there is no outcome to list. However, all the real world learnings that you could pick up from doing research, from doing user testing, those things, from trying new platforms, those things all exist, okay? A school project is just like a work project that ultimately didn't launch, all right? And I've done enough work projects that got shelved at the 11th hour for whatever reason to know that they are no different than a, quote, school project. but I want you to focus on what did you learn from that process. And that needs to be specific. It needs to talk in detail about, hey, you know what? I had this assumption, and we tested it, and that totally fell flat on its face. I need that in the case study. And Jared Spool, this was like a couple of years ago. I pulled this up because it's easy to find these things on Twitter. But he was talking about case studies and things practically every portfolio is missing. The challenges we ran into. I realized we didn't understand. Our first attempt was we learned these critical things we never knew about our users. That's so core and fundamental. His next statement, though, is the kicker, and of course his next statement didn't load. His next statement basically was, if your portfolio isn't talking about the flaws, it doesn't feel real. So keep those things in mind. The third sort of portfolio or third sort of case study thing that we see so often is the unsolicited redesign. I redesigned Nike, or I redesigned Microsoft, and these things drive me nuts. Okay? They're self-promotion. They don't belong in your portfolio at all. They're not useless though. Okay? I want to like stomp that out right now, because my first indication talking about unsolicited redesigns, where you basically say, I'm going to redesign the Apple website, and I'm going to show you all the things that are wrong with the LA Times, or take whatever brand that bugs you and you go redesign it. I want to unpack that a bit, because it's not a useless exercise. Okay? It is not helpful to the people who tried to do that. The people who made the Apple site or the Netflix site or the Nike site, they are under constraints that you could never understand because you weren't in the room for those conversations. But that doesn't mean that those exercises are useless. So, just one of the things on the case study club site was this Netflix UX UI case study, where they were reimagining the Netflix experience. And this is great. You can do a lot of things here. You can clearly design a new experience. You could user test that experience. You could actually run research on that. This is like a great bit of this is like a fantastic look at competitive analysis. Like if they were going to start up a Netflix competitor, you could totally look at Netflix and kind of pick it apart and say, here's what we found. What you couldn't do is understand what the designers at Netflix were up against when they designed the experience that you're redesigning. Okay? It's kind of an ass thing to do to say, I've made it better, without being connected with that organization at all. All right? It's even bad with somebody inside. And I've seen this. I've probably done this, where somebody inside of an organization goes, this all sucks, I'm going to redo it. Okay? It's harmful to us as designers when that happens. But the question then really is, well, should I do one of those? Should I redesign that website that I was thinking about? And the answer is sure. I think that's fine. Well, what does that mean? Well, here's the thing. When you redesign a site, you're getting reps in. Okay? This is like a band playing a cover song. Okay? That band isn't necessarily going to release that song as their own and try to say their version of the song was better. If they did, they'd still have to pay the original band because it's their music. I think this is a fine way to get better at design. It's just reps. You're just flexing your design muscles, and you're trying things, and if you're out there doing research on this, if you are spending time to test, I think that's great. That's fine. What I don't want is I don't want these things on public display. Like, putting an unsolicited redesign on public display, particularly in your portfolio, is frankly a sign that you might be an asshole. And I'm saying that as nicely as I can. It's just, it's not it's not it's not the type of person I would want to bring into my organization. Okay? If you want to redesign things, and trust me, even as a class project in college, I redesigned like the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. It was horrible, by the way, but it was one of my first assignments. And all my instructor was saying was, try to get some reps, try to see what you can learn about design by looking at their stuff and pulling it apart. That's all that they were saying. They were not saying, go do this and then go tell the world how much better your version of it is. And I say this because there are things out there like this. Why your Nike redesign is bad. A letter to myself. After you go through a little bit of time, let's say you do one of these. You do this redesign. You'll have a moment where you go, oh, now I understand what that original designer was up against. Now I understand the constraints that team was happening. And this typically happens after you get your first or second job. After you deal with the rigors of actually doing this work, then you understand that it's more than just pushing pixels around and having an epiphany. You understand that there's real considerations that go into this. There are constraints. There are things that we can do something that seems really great in our head, but it's actually harmful to the user. And we need a team of people around us to kind of push back and let us know when we're going off the rails. If you haven't read this and you haven't seen it, it's there. This is somebody who did that Nike redesign a couple of years ago, and then they realized like a year later, like, God, that feels bad. I'd advise taking a look. But there are self-promotional things that you can do. You might have noticed that the Netflix thing was, they released the case study on Medium. Well, that's an interesting angle. Why would somebody release a case study on Medium? And it's because a lot of people read Medium, and a lot of people push links around from Medium. You can get a lot of positive feedback from releasing your case study on Medium. Case in point, Cody Dennis, former student, released his Sphere Pharmacy app on Medium and got a lot of really helpful feedback. People reaching out wanting to talk about job opportunities because they were able to dig into his case study before he actually had a portfolio. He just wrote his case study, put it on Medium, and saw what the reaction was. That's far more valuable to you as a designer than putting out a Nike redesign. If you're gonna do the self-promotion, I'm gonna put something up on Medium, put your own stuff up on Medium. Don't wait to build out the portfolio. Just put your stuff up on Medium and see how people react. I think it's a great way to do a first cut of the portfolio, but ultimately, I'd rather see your work and your ideas than you attaching yourself to some brand, because I think it's unfair to the designers. I think it's also, frankly, it's icky because you're now presenting yourself as, I am somehow associated with Netflix or Nike or whomever, and you're not. So that feels weird. Okay, like only show work that you actually are, with brands that you're actually associated with. It comes off the other way comes off as faking it, and that person is like an immediate, like, just stay away from them. So the final piece that I want to talk about is literally the anatomy of your case study. And the anatomy of your case study needs to be tuned because there are different audiences looking at your case studies. And I'm not talking about your mom, and I'm not talking about your classmates or people that you work with. I'm talking about the people that are coming in that don't know you, okay? The people that are coming in that don't know, you do not generally know the people that you're going to be working with, that are going to be looking at your case study. When you submit a resume and you send over a link to your case study, you don't typically know the person on the other end of that. You might know somebody that says, there's a job over here and you should apply, but you don't know necessarily who your case study is going to be seen by. Case studies should travel as two parts. They should feel like a story or a narrative that explains how this thing came to be. And basically, I'm going to be referring to these as the head and the body. The top of this needs to be easy to quickly scan. The body of this needs to be very detailed and go in depth. And it maps directly to the two different parts, to two different groups that are going to be seeing this. So the head is, what is it and how did you do it? What is this project? Like literally, you should have the name of the project, because I don't know. I'm coming to this cold. I don't know the name of this thing. I don't know what it is. Give me a summary. How'd you do it? Like, what was the problem? How did it come out? What did you do on this? We'll get more into detail in a second. And then the body is like, how did you do this? Like, I see this and I see the top of this and I see this visual. How did you get there? What issues did you have? What pits did you fall in? Like, literally the journey, that's the body of your case study. And the two types of people that we're talking about, I'm going to refer to them as scanners and divers, because honestly, I don't necessarily know who they are in terms of their role. There might be a design director, an HR person, hiring manager, a lead designer, a CEO. Like, you don't necessarily know who's coming in, okay? They will be scanners and they will be divers. And they will play, maybe the CEO is scanning and their design director is diving, or the HR person scanning and the CEO is diving. Either way, you don't necessarily know what their title is. What you do know is that they're performing different functions. Typically, two different people are going to be doing this. The scanners want to determine whether you are worth spending more time with. I've got 100 portfolios and I need to look at them by 3 o'clock today. Everybody's getting 30 seconds. That's basically what you got. They look at everybody. So they're comparing your case study versus somebody else versus somebody else versus somebody else. You've got to stand out. How much time do you have? You got about 30 seconds. You got about 30 seconds to give me, I need the overview and a link. That link better be up high, because if I miss it, like if I want to go look at the prototype or the live site, it needs to be right there. I'm not going to go hunting for it. But this, what was it that you worked on? What was the problem? What was the solution? What'd you do? I immediately distrust any case study that's like, yeah, I did everything. It's like, if you did everything, like, I need you to list that. I need you to specifically say, I did the research, I did the visual design, I did the front end, I did all aspects. Okay, there was no team. And if you say, did it solo, that's fine. But I need you to specifically say that. If I don't see any attribution, I'm like, oh, I don't know what part of this they did. Specifically say what you did. If you did just the UX research, that's fine. You can put the visuals there. I just need you to say, I did the research. And it's great, honestly, if you say, the kick-ass visuals are by such and such. That's fine. I now know that you're willing to give props to other people. That's actually a really good thing. That means that you're not going to be so damn protective and wearing a suit of armor when we're trying to collaborate together. You're going to give credit where credit's due. I like that. What was your role? How long did you have to work on it? Was this a hackathon thing? Was this like a project that took 2 years? Like, what level of detail should I be seeing from this case study? And then how did it or you do? And this is where the difference between a work project and a school project. How did it do? Like, I need to see a summary really fast of Like, I was trying to do X and it did or didn't do that. If it's a project that didn't launch, or if it's a school project, I fell on my face 3 times and I got back up, and here's the big lesson that I learned. I want you to think about this like an executive summary. In an executive summary, typically a design team will have to present a one sheet, the high level details and how the project is proceeding to the team, to the leaders at the company. That one-sheeter approach here allows you to think in terms of high level. I need to get away from the details. I need to distill this down to where somebody can like spend 30 seconds with me and go, okay, they're in. I'm going to give them a second look. All right? If you're missing parts of this, if I have to go hunting around, if I don't know if I can't get a gist for what it is, you're out. You're out because not only are you missing parts of it, but you just haven't resonated with me. You haven't resonated with the person on the other side that's trying to determine, are we bringing this person in? Can they explain their work like really fast, or are they the person that's like, can you give me a quick update? And then they take like 15 minutes to give you a quick update. Like I need somebody who can break it down into a soundbite, and this is your opportunity to show that you can break it down into a soundbite. Because I need you to get past the scanners so you can get to the divers. And the divers are going to want to know everything. The divers are looking for you to be able to explain your process in detail, not feel, this is the time to be verbose, okay? But I say that, and I want you to understand that you can insert errors by being verbose. So you have to know, like, where is that line? Where is that line where I'm just inserting grammatical and factual and spelling error? I'm inserting all these errors because I'm being too verbose. I want this to be easy to consume. All right? I need to be able to like quickly, easily make my way down. Don't like introduce any like sideways type or type that's hard to read or images that are way too small. Like, everything should be easy to consume. Compelling visuals. If a visual is boring, if it doesn't show much, if it's like, oh, and here's our user flow for X, and it's hard to read, like, get rid of it. Like, I need you to edit out visuals that aren't going to translate for this medium. If anything, link to that. And we talk about linking to deeper documentation. That's what I mean. Like, if you have visuals that are important, but they're not great to, like, they don't really show the process, like, just include a link to them. Like, here's all of our user flows. The progress over time. I think Creative Crackpot asked this question earlier about, how do I show it? Do I find, is it distracting to show a before after? Not at all. The best before after that I typically see is like sketch, wireframe, final prototype. Okay, like 1, 2, 3. Those show your ability to like take a word problem, turn it into a loose sketch, get something that's testable, and then take it to the finish line. Those progressions are really effective. All right, and then finally, back to the spool thing. I want to see the flaws. I want to see the issues. I want to know what happened. No project will go smoothly in your career. Like, every project will have some sort of hiccup. If it's a project that pushes the boundaries at all, it's going to have hiccups. So that being known, being that we all know that none of these projects are just like, oh, it went perfectly. We're expecting to see flaws. We're expecting to see issues, so make sure that is in there. Finally, in closing, I want to emphasize that people want to see an honest representation of your work. All right? They're not looking for you to dress it up and be perfect. Matter of fact, as we've said before, if people see your case study and it feels too perfect, they're going to immediately distrust it. It needs to show not just the shiny, pretty parts. It needs to talk about the places where you fell on your face, okay? Every time you fall on your face, it's an opportunity to pick yourself up with a new bit of knowledge. And I want to hire people who have fallen on their face enough that they're not going to make the stupid, simple mistakes. Every project, it has an opportunity to fail, okay? And you will have a project that will blow up on you. It'll happen. I just want to know as an employer that it's not going to happen because of some stupid, simple error that everybody's made before, except I hired the one person who hasn't made that error before. Okay? I hired the one person who has performed user research before, but hasn't listened to their users? Really? I hired that person? No. I want to know that you've performed that cycle before where you did the thing, you thought you understood what they wanted, you implemented it, and then they said, nope, that wasn't what we wanted. Because we've all been there. We've all had projects like that. I just want to make sure that you're on the same page with the rest of the team. So with that, I want to make sure that we have some time here for questions. See here, Creative Crackpot. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. This is for me, this is the thing that I'm really passionate about. I really believe that a good, solid case study can get you there. As Karen said earlier, Karen got a job. She had an impromptu case study. Like, she wasn't finished with her program. She knew her project inside and out. She was able to explain it in a good case study, and it got her a job. So I really think that a case study is the foundation of every good portfolio. It's not just that shiny opening screen that you first come to. So if anybody has a question, feel free to jump in. It's been great seeing the chat going. Also, remember that you're always welcome to come into the new Pragmatic Slack channel and visit anytime. I'm posting videos and we're having conversations there literally every day. If you're looking for feedback, that's the best place to find me. So with that, I think we had one project actually that I didn't get to. I wanted to take a look at Abraham Friedman's portfolio. He had sent over a portfolio into Feedback Loop. This is typically the time for Feedback Loop, but we just adjusted it this week for a special dive into case studies. So let's jump into Abraham Friedman's portfolio really quick. It says, I am a New York-based UX designer. I really want a hyphen there. I am a people's person who is obsessed with technology, bursting with ideas, and wants to make an impact. One thing I would say here, this is just me being grammar nerd. I'm Abraham Friedman. I'm. Even this is I'm. So, hi, I'm Abraham Friedman, New York-based UX designer. Like, just get rid of that I'm a, and like just say New York-based UX designer, and give me that hyphen, and then I'm a people's person. I almost would say people's I don't know. That sounds weird. You could say ape. Yeah, I guess I'd keep it here, but I've got to lose one of these. You've got three. You've got the I am thing 3 times here. I got to lose one of them. Also, look out for those. That looks like a tick mark, but it might be a quote in that font. It's hard to tell. It's just straight up and down. It feels like a tick mark. I would try to make sure I got a smart quote there, especially on like my big header. I still like your logo, the A and the F. It's really smart. Photo integration. I do want to take a look. You mentioned CSS. You made some improvements here. This is a little better. I want to see. Yeah, the spacing there is nice. It's weird though. The spacing here is different from the spacing here. It's like I want a little bit more consistency there. I realize that tweaking for mobile is, and I'm on the Galaxy S5. Let's go ahead and jump down to another just to kind of take a look. Tweaking for mobile can be a bit of a back and forth. But I think this needs a little more tweaking. I also would tweak the header to line up with the edges of your content. It looks like it might be like at 80% width, and this is at 90% width. So take a look at that. Let's go ahead and jump in. I want to take a look at your case study. Photogration, problem solution. Oh yeah, now I'm remembering this project. This is a lot simpler, Abraham. If you watched the feedback loop a couple of weeks ago, and you could go find it on YouTube if you wanted to. This grid, there was like 4 different grids that he had, and then every header was really specialized, and you've really done a good job of simplifying it overall. And I do recognize, like, the struggle with simplifying the grid is there are areas where you want to go wide, there's areas where you want to go narrow, but you've done a good job here of making enough of it fit into a common space, and then knowing when to go wide. That this is just so much better than where you were just a couple weeks ago. I really think these quotes are kind of out of scale with the rest of what we're seeing here. I'm not really sure what to do with them. I don't have an idea of what to do with them off the top of my head. It's just, as we're going through, it's like those quotes are like the biggest things in the entire package so far, and they just like stick out. So I'd try to tweak that. This is kind of a odd placement for that, so I'd take a look at that. God, man, me. Yeah. Oh, I think it might try to be underneath, because here they're underneath. I would look at the spacing here. Like, this needs some padding there, or margin, however you want to do it. These are areas where I would rather give this like a light gray background and remove this black border, so that I can feel like the paper feels like you're trying to clean it up right now, and I would much rather this hard edge be gone, so I really feel more like it's a white sheet of paper. It's just the same thing here. Like, that black border really isn't there, and I don't want it there. I would really look at putting a tone behind this, just for that section though. And here's a quote that's completely different from the other quote style. I would try to, again, simplify it. You've got 2, why not have 1? I really like the work that you did here previously. I like the breakdown of the logo. Although I think you could do, like, this is way better than where you started. But what I'm imagining is your next project is going to be significantly better than this one. Because when I look at this one, I think to myself, okay, what would happen if it was just black and white? Like, what would this design be without any color at all? Because it looks like you're relying on the color to kind of indicate share. And it's a share icon with photo. I get that. I worry about what happens when there's no color. We talked about this, and it looks like you're still working down here. So I'm going to leave this part alone, because I can tell text that you're still working. But overall, like, grid structure's way better. Headers are way better. Overall, this has taken a lot of big steps forward. I would consider, like, roles, duration, tools. I'd pull this process thing up here into a second column, because I'm just like scrolling forever through this really thin area. That's kind of a downer. I think you could actually do roles, duration, tools, process. Like, you could actually do 3 columns here. But whatever you want to do, it's still, the whole damn thing is still better than where you were a couple of weeks ago, Abraham. Let's finish this thing up though, down below, and I think you'll be in a much better state. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am Chris Courtney. This has been a special edition of the Feedback Loop, really focusing on case studies. Even in looking at Abraham's work, we're looking at a case study. I want to encourage all of you to sign up, to subscribe here on YouTube. We are releasing videos. I should say right now it's just me, but I'm releasing videos literally all the time here on YouTube. You can find us on any of the social media channels, but the best way to interact with me is through the New Pragmatic Slack channel. If you go to newpragmatic.com, I'll switch the video back really fast. Newpragmatic.com. If you go back to newpragmatic.com and you hop on the home page, what you'll see is that there is a big Apply for Access Now button. That Apply for Access Now button is going to get you access into our Slack channel, where you can visit with myself and a number of other designers from around the world that are part of this early community. This is the time. This is the time to get in. If you want to have one-on-one conversations with me about your projects and your growth as a designer, if you're wanting feedback on your job search, this is the time to get in. This will not last long. At some point in the very near future, we're going to launch New Pragmatic, and classes and mentorship and all that will be available. Right now, it's the community build time. Come on in, get your seat. The time, it's never a better time than right now. So apply for access, and I hope to see each and every one of you in the New Pragmatic Slack in the weeks to come. But otherwise, I am Chris Courtney. This has been the Feedback Loop, specifically focusing on making better case studies, and I hope all of you have a fantastic week. We will talk soon. See ya.